Hello and welcome. My name is Jess and you're listening to Legaltini, your very own sip of law school. The goal of this podcast is to give you just a taste of what it's like going to law school. Whether you're already in school, considering it, have a loved one currently experiencing the fun that is law school, or you just want to follow my journey, I'm so glad you're here.
You can also follow me on Instagram at legaltini_podcast and check out my website legaltini.com. And if you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to rate and review below.
Grab your Legaltini and let's take a sip. Good morning. Welcome back to Legaltini. In this second episode about my summer in a big law firm here in Raleigh. And the first episode, if you missed it, just go back and listen to it. But basically, I talked about what big law is, even because we hear these, people talking about big law, we hear these words, but what does that actually mean? So I would recommend, if you haven't listened to that one yet, pop back over and listen to that one first, because it gives a really good baseline of information that you'll kind of need to understand this one. So this is part 2. And what I'm going to talk about in this episode is how to get a big law job. And I really mean a summer associate job while you're in law school. And I had intended to talk about what to do once you get the job, but this has gotten a little bit longer than I expected. And so I am going to cut that further in half. And so my next podcast will then be about what to do once you get there. I've got a few tips, a few little tricks, and I'll share that in my next podcast. But for the sake of just this one, we're going to focus on how to get the job in big law. Now, big disclaimer, I can only tell you what I know and what I've been told by the folks running the interview process at these big firms. So if you're in law school and you're interested in big law, amazing. Keep in mind, it's not for everyone. That's a big thing that I have heard and I think seen. And I think it's important to keep an open mind that you may think you want to do big law, but you could be wrong. This could be something that you're not actually interested in and that isn't what you're looking for. So keep in mind that yes, big law is attractive for a number of reasons, most of which I talked about in my last podcast, going over sort of what big law is. It might be attractive to you to have a position that's paid and a position that's sort of reputable, all these things, but it may not be something that really serves you and may not be what you want to do. So it's not for everyone, and that's okay. Keep that in mind. But again, big disclaimer, I can only tell you what I know, what I've experienced. So that's what I plan to do. And, take it or leave it. Everybody has their own process and theories about things. So this is just my approach. This is clearly what worked for me. I just finished my first summer experience at a big law firm, and I want to share my experience because I didn't know very much going in to law school about what big law is. I've learned a lot in the past year, and obviously now have learned a ton having gone through the experience, but I just want to share what my experience is and my thoughts as far as how someone who's interested in this might be able to give themselves the best possible shot at an interview and how to nail that interview. So these are my thoughts. Big law is great. It's a great environment for anyone who wants a ton of experience and a variety of work experiences during their summer. It's pretty fast-paced, and you should be ready to manage multiple things at once. So time management, prioritizing work, communicating effectively with the other people that you're around, those should be some of your strengths if you want to be successful at a big law firm. Now, don't get spooked if you know you need to grow in some of those areas. This is also a great opportunity to hone those skills if you're really determined to do that. So I'll talk about that some more kind of after I talk about how to get the job, because obviously that kind of goes into what you do once you're there. But first things first, let's get the job. So every firm is different because every firm has a different attorney or group of attorneys who's reviewing candidates, and each one is going to have their own nitpicky thoughts about what kind of candidate they're looking for, what a good resume looks like, what a good cover letter looks like. And so it's tough because every firm is going to have a different approach to that. But there are some ways to make sure you're avoiding major pitfalls and putting your very best foot forward to hopefully get that very best foot in the door. Getting an interview is somewhat a game of luck, but there are definitely strategies that you can employ that will serve you well and I believe helped me secure the role that I just completed. So some of those nitpicky things are using Times New Roman font for your cover letter and your resume. Don't try to get cute. This is not a time where you want to stand out. This is a time where you want to show that you are part of the pack. And I know that that feels counterproductive and everybody always tells you, oh, you want your resume to stand out. But in a legal interview space, especially for summer positions where there are just hordes of applications coming through, you want yours to fit into a pile that they're saying, okay, if I'm looking at this, I'm either throwing it in the trash bin or I'm throwing it in a pile to review again. They're reviewing these multiple times. So the first round of review is to pull out anything that's an outlier, anything that's just too wild, too different. So use Times New Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch margins, be standardized in the way that you present your information, because where you want to stand out is your experience, the way that you talk about yourself, the way that you portray what you've gone through and how that shaped how you are today. That's where you stand out. You don't want to stand out because you're using some swirly font for your name or, because you've got so much information that you have to have smaller point font or something like that. That's not what you want. You want to show that with the same formatting, the same exact paper, you're able to stand out because of your experience. So that is really the bottom line kind of spirit that you want to have in creating these documents. You want to stand out because of who you are, not because of what the paper looks like. All right, so getting to the nitty-gritty of getting a big law job. I've got 7 things to tell you. And I know that feels like a lot, but I promise it all makes sense and it's all important. So I'm going to try to make it easy for you to remember. This is just my approach again. So here are the 7 things. First is network. Aha, you did not think this podcast was about networking, did you? Surprise, it's in basically everything that we do. So networking is the first thing. Second is write the best cover letter humanly possible. Third, ask a professor to support you. Fourth, prepare for the love of God. 5, work the room, mirroring, but not always. 6, meaningful follow-up after the fact, even if you think you bombed it. And 7, keep at it, even if you hear crickets. So, first, networking. For real, this is the sneaky first step. Because if you haven't grabbed coffee with enough people to make you feel like a conversation pro when you sit down at the interview, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. Think about it. Meeting an attorney that you don't know for coffee is the exact same thing as an interview. You're trying to make a great impression. You want to learn more about their practice. You want them to think of you or remember you if they ever have an opportunity in the future. You're going to be asked many of the same questions that you'll be asked in an interview, such as, why did you decide to go to law school? What have your favorite classes been? What kind of law interests you? Where do you see your career in 5 to 10 years, etc.? So networking is really like practice interviewing. So that's the first reason that networking is the sneaky first step. The second reason is because if you can network with people at that firm and you already can have a familiar face when you get to the room, oh my gosh, is that amazing. It is so much easier to talk to someone for a second time in an interview setting than if it's the brand new first time you've ever met any of the people that you're interviewing with. And one other tip about the interviewing process is that a lot of times you'll have multiple people coming in and out of the room. And so it's so nice if, you're meeting with these people that you've never met and all of a sudden in comes someone that you've met before. You can relax, you can show yourself a little bit more, you can have a little bit more personality in that moment because, when they walk in, you can be like, oh, Susie, it's so great to see you again. How have you been since XYZ event? That happened to me in this interview process that I went through with the firm that I got a job with. And there was a woman that I had met briefly at a networking event, but I knew that I had met her and I knew that she would maybe be able to drop in on my interview. So I'd gone back over my notes from that networking event and I had remembered, oh yeah, we talked about this. And so I was able to really easily recall, oh yeah, I talked to her at that networking event about this thing. So I could kind of drop that in my conversation with her. And so it made it look like I was well connected. It made it look like I was comfortable. I had, an easy way of conversing with people. I remembered. So networking, the sneaky first step of interviewing. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about networking. But if you haven't listened to my podcast on it, I would highly recommend it. So next, the second one is writing the best cover letter that is humanly possible. So here's the thing about cover letters. This is the most important part of your application packet to really any firm or job, not even just big law. But when you're submitting a document that you have all the time in the world to perfect, you can have 100 people review it if you want. You can reread it and restructure it as many times as you want to make it perfect. This cover letter should be flawless. Now, back up a second. When I say all the time in the world, I recognize that means in all your free time in law school, which is like very little and at 2 a.m. and usually broken up into small bursts of energy. But I get it. Hear me out. This step is crucial with a capital C. The firm that I worked at shared with me some of their process on how they review applications, and the cover letter is the first thing that they look at. Not your resume, not your transcript, your cover letter. Obviously, big law firms are anticipating that folks who don't fall within the reach of their grade preferences aren't really applying to those firms. But if you're pushing that line a little bit, it's me, you might have a shot if your cover letter knocks their socks off. And from what I understand, they are more willing to talk to someone who doesn't necessarily fall into the criteria that they're looking for if their cover letter really knocks them over and shows them that, wow, this person may not be, in the top whatever, but they have some experience. They know how to articulate. They know how to talk about themselves. And that's critical in the legal field. So write your best cover letter humanly possible. Have at least one other person review it, if not more. Get some feedback from them. Ask them questions like, after reading this, what do you know about me? What do you think about me as a candidate? And don't just have them read it for grammar errors. Have them read it for content, because what you want to get across to your interviewer must come across in your first 2 paragraphs of your cover letter. It is so important that you focus your energy on those. I know that they feel like, who's even going to read this cover letter? This is such a waste of time. This all feels so, fake. There is a way to do it where it's genuine and you are showing interest and you are really propping yourself up as the candidate that they want to interview. And you do that in the cover letter. Third, ask a professor to call the firm and recommend you. Okay, I say this because I had no idea that this was a thing. I did not know that you could have a professor call the firm that you're interested in or interviewing with and say, hey, I'd really like to recommend this person or this student for this role. I didn't know that was a thing. So I tell you this because I didn't know, and I think that it is a valuable option for people, especially if you've created those great connections with a professor. Definitely do this if you have the opportunity. Now, honestly, I didn't end up using it, which was basically my fault because it all kind of happened quickly. And by the time that he offered this to me, I had already interviewed. And so it was kind of, I didn't know when to use that card. And he, because he had said 1 to 2 places, I wanted to make sure that it was going to be the 1 to 2 that I was most interested in. So I didn't feel like I could do that until I had done all of my interviews. Anyways, it was a little bit chaotic in my mind. But now looking back, I realize I need to have decided before the interview which firms I was most interested in and tell him, hey, my interview is on X date at X time. Could you please call that day or the following day? And in talking to some of the associates at the firm, they expressed that if you're going to have someone call to recommend you, you want to make sure it's on the same day because you need to be fresh on their mind. They're doing a lot of interviews. They're meeting a ton of people. So you want to make sure that if you have a professor call, it is right on the front of their mind that you just talked to them. So just a thought on that. Okay, the fourth thing is prepare for the love of God. Okay, I have heard some horror stories from the associates of interviews that they did where people were just not prepared. And I just don't understand it. They don't understand it. Interviewees will come in and ask different attorneys what their practice area is. And, okay, maybe there's someone who pops into the interview that you didn't know that you were interviewing with and you're curious about what they do. That's fine. That's very different. But if you have a list ahead of time and you know who you're going to interview with, you absolutely should already know what their practice area is. And I think part of it is that we feel a little creepy when we prepare and we know who we're talking to. But I am here to tell you that that does not come off as creepy. That comes off as prepared. And anything to the contrary comes off as unprepared. You don't want to be there. You're not excited about this opportunity and you get shut out pretty quick. So the first thing under preparation is you have to know the people. Ask meaningful questions. Do not ask what their practice area is if you have any reason to know ahead of time who you're interviewing with. Look up those people. And if you don't have a list, call the recruiter and ask. Try to find out. Make every solid effort to try to find out. You could even try and call and talk to a receptionist. She might have access to the calendar and know who is potentially going to participate in your interview. And honestly, if all else fails, look up as many people as possible to know their practice area and try to find just one small thing about each attorney. Maybe where they went to school or some feather they have in their cap about a big case that they won, something like that. Anything you can do to show, hey, I did some due diligence here, is going to show them that you care. It's not going to come off creepy. I know it feels that way, but it's not. It's really just going to show them that you are genuinely interested in this firm and you put in the work. The second thing under preparation is know yourself. So first is know the people. Second, know yourself. Third, we'll get to in just a second, is know the answer, but know yourself is next. So you will be getting a ton of who are you questions, and you will answer them with more confidence and certainty and calm if you already know the answer before you try to navigate the question during an interview. So think less thinking on the fly equals more cool, calm, collected vibes in the interview. So what this really means is that you have to do some self-reflection. When they ask you, what made you want to be an attorney? You need to know the answer to that question. And my parents made me is not a good answer. It might be the truth and it might be genuine, but that's not the right answer, because if you're here in law school grinding and working so hard, you need to find your honest why and then how to articulate it and how to make that present to the interviewer exactly what you're trying to convey to them. So you have to know yourself, do that work. And honestly, that's not just for interviewing. I mean, that's for life. Like you got to know your why and why you're doing all this hard work. It's going to help you in law school. It's going to help you get through those really tough days and weeks and months. And I mean, that's just gold. You got to do that. Okay. So third thing after know the people, know yourself, know the answer. So I got this advice from a great speaker recently, and I thought it was really, really great. I've been interviewing personally for a long time. I worked for 10 years before coming to law school. I've interviewed for a lot of jobs. So when I get those standard questions in an interview, like, what's a book you've recently read? Something like that, that's kind of just a standard across industry. A lot of people ask that question. I know how to answer it because I've done this a bunch of times. And so I've got answers for those sort of canned questions. But I plan to use this method that this guy shared for newer types of questions that are particularly related to the legal field that I might not be as prepared for. And honestly, it's just a good way to do this. So here it is. What you want to do is compile a list of as many interview questions as you can. And I would say a minimum would be 10 to 15, just to give you like a ballpark. And then write out draft answers to those questions. Yes, physically type out your answers. And then come back the next day or so and read them. refine them, trim them down by about 20% to get to the most concise version of the answer. Then, a few days later, come back again. Revise them, trim them down, reorganize them, structure them in a different way. Trim them down, make them concise. Do this until you can literally trim nothing else away, and then practice saying them to a friend, in front of a mirror, in the shower, on a run, wherever you are. Keep practicing the answers. And this is not so that you sound scripted, but so that you can answer in a concise way. Then when you get these similar questions or kind of standardized questions in an interview, you already know what you're going to say, and you can focus on delivery, reading the room as you talk, connecting with people as you talk. So those more detailed social skills, which of course is going to bring me to my next point. My next point is work the room. But compiling the list of interview questions is a really key way to making yourself come off as really polished, but not scripted. And you can get these interview questions by asking people, what's your favorite interview question? You can do that on your coffee dates that you do in networking. You can say, I'm curious, what is your go-to interview question when you're interviewing someone? It's a great conversation starter. Then you get to basically answer the question. It's a really key way to talk with someone and get access to those questions. And then you're going to be prepared in an interview. So, as I said, on to my next point, which is working the room. And it's mirroring, but not always. So what I mean by work the room is that lots of people, I think, want to know how to act in an interview. Should you have lots of personality or no personality? Should you get everyone laughing or show them how serious you are? Should you focus on your grades or focus on activities? Are you confident? Are you humble? Should you be cold or warm or overly prepared or able to wing it? What is the vibe? And I think the key is to think backwards. So what do you want the interviewer to think, feel, and know about you after you leave the room? For example, if you want them to know how much you want this job and feel like you'd be a great part of the team dynamic and know that you have the drive and maturity to handle difficult tasks, make your interactions speak to those things. You'll need to read the room, obviously, while you're there, but a great starting point, I think, for every interview experience is just extreme professionalism and genuine interest. And the reason that I go that route initially is because think about what the interviewing attorney is looking at when they're meeting you for the first time. They're thinking in their mind, could I introduce this person to a client? Could I bring this person to a meeting? Will they be good at representing our firm? That's what's going through their mind. And so that's what you want to portray is imagine that you're meeting a client for the first time. What does a client want to see when they meet a young attorney? They want some maturity. They want professionalism. They want someone who's genuinely going to listen to them and care and find what they're saying is important. They don't want someone that's going to talk over them. They don't want someone that's cocky. They don't want, you get the idea. So the key is thinking backwards so that you can portray exactly what you want them to walk away from the interview knowing and thinking and feeling about you. So when you initially shake hands with your interviewer or interviewers, you want a firm grip, you want direct eye contact, you want genuine and warm interaction. This means that you stand up if you're already sitting at the table. Don't do a seated handshake. Don't do it. You're not afraid of them, and you want your face to be happy or neutral. It's not a grimace. You're not averting your eyes. You're not afraid. Have a salutation ready. So something like, good morning. Hope you didn't get too soggy in the rain out there. It's something stupid, right? Like just have something to say as you're shaking their hand so that you're not like just staring into their eyes smiling. The first 20 seconds is usually small talk. And so you want to have something ready to say about the sports team or the weather or the traffic or whatever it is as everyone's taking their seat. This is how you can disarm and sort of lighten the mood without being unprofessional. It shows that you're comfortable, you're confident, you're easy to be around. You're going to make this easy on them, and that is huge. That is huge, huge, huge. So the first several minutes are the most important part. A good rule of thumb is to show genuine interest in the interviewer. Be curious about his or her role at the firm. And remember, you already know some things about this person, and it's good to show them that you know. I saw on your profile that you blah, 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 blah. Tell me more about your work on this task or your work with this client. I'm really interested in this. That's, again, not creepy. It shows that you're prepared. When you are asked questions, slow down. Don't sprint through your answer. Try to break your answer into digestible bits, saying things like, sure, I think I have 2 thoughts on that. First, blah, 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 blah. Second, blah, 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 blah. Those are some good points, by the way. These attorneys are busy. They're tired. They're sometimes running on fumes. They need more coffee. They're taking time to meet with you. So when you can make it easier on them by not making them carry the whole load of the conversation, they will be grateful and they will remember that. When in doubt, or when there's a lull, be ready to provide your own thoughts or questions, and remember to go back to that list of things that you want to convey, that you want them to come away with knowing, thinking, feeling about you. If you have stories to share that really illustrate those things and you haven't been able to share them yet, like they just haven't really come up in conversation, or they could have fit somewhere else and you just didn't get a chance to say it, you can say something like, I don't know, going back to your thoughts on the qualities that you're looking for in an associate. My parents always instilled in me the idea of doing things right the first time, and that's been so helpful in school. And there was a time that, and then you can share a story, and it's basically you're just conversing with them. And it shows a few things. It shows that you're really thinking about the questions that they're asking and paying attention, that you have more under the surface than what you're immediately sharing. It's kind of like this iceberg effect, like, oh, by the way, there's so much more under here that I haven't been able to share. And it's like it almost leaves them wanting more. It like gives them the idea that, oh gosh, and there's something else. Oh, and one more thing. And I'm just full of stories about how I'm these ways. It shows that you have more under the surface than what you immediately shared. And also it shows that you're a conversationalist because you're able to navigate and circle back to points that are already past, and you can do so smoothly. I usually do this if I sense a lull coming in the conversation and I want to keep things moving. The thing about sensing a lull is that if you're sensing it, they're sensing it. So if you're the one to jump up and say, hey, I've got something else to say, let me handle that, it shows them that you're willing to put in the work in the conversation and you're not just going to wait for them silently for them to ask the next question. It's a conversation. It's not a, berating you with a bunch of questions and you just answering that one question. You're turning it into a conversation. Okay, last thing to talk about within the work the room concept is mirroring. And this is a great way to know the tone of the interview. So if your interviewer is relaxed and easygoing, you can and really should relax just a little. You want to mirror to a slightly more reserved and professional degree your interviewer. There's a small exception to that. If your interviewer is borderline inappropriate or starts cursing or something during the interview that is just not professional, you do not want to do that. That is not your invitation to do the same. You want to remain professional, keep the conversation focused on the job and why you're the best candidate that's applying. And bottom line, you want to have a genuine conversation. The best way to practice and improve is to do it. So set up some coffee dates, like today, set them up. Get your email pulled up and find some folks. Go back and listen to my networking. I have like a 2-part series on that, and it's, very helpful information. So go back and do that because I'm not kidding. Networking, name of the game. Okay, we have 2 more sections to go through. 6 is meaningful follow-up after the fact. So the interview's over, you've said goodbye. Even if you think you've bombed it, you need to send a thank you. And handwritten thank you cards are the best, but email is also okay, especially if you don't have time to really make the handwritten ones meaningful and timely. And when I say timely, I mean within 24 hours. So, you want to get this out quickly. And if you can do a handwritten note, like if you live close by and you can just drop them off with the receptionist, that's ideal. But if you can't do that, you can't get them there quick enough, an email is fine. But you do want to make them personal to each person who interviews with you. So you can't pre-write them. You can't pre-write them. Did you hear me say that? You cannot pre-write thank you cards because you want to make them personal to each person. Try to remember things that they said. Something that I like to do is ask each interviewer during the course of the interview what qualities they're looking for in a summer associate or whatever, the role is that you're applying for. And then I jot them down as they respond. And later in the thank you, I try to incorporate it somehow. I try to incorporate and include something like, I appreciated that you shared that professionalism was something you find extremely important in a summer associate. My experience working with professionals for 10 years before attending law school has taught me blah, blah, blah. Then you can talk about, the brand that you create for yourself as a professional is more important than anything else. And it really resonated with me that you also find that to be a critical asset in an associate, something like that. So you're not saying, hey, you want professional. It's me. I'm professional because I am. It's me. Everything's about me. You're showing and not telling necessarily that you have that quality by saying that really resonated with me or I really appreciate that is showing that you have that quality instead of saying, I hear you like people that work hard. I work hard. It just is different. And P.S., if you're sending thank you emails or just sending emails in general for networking, things like that, please, please, please send a professionally styled email. So, dear Miss Marks, you don't want to say, hey. You don't want to say, you don't want to use a first name on a first email. Now, if you've already met with them and they've said, oh, call me Jess, something like that, then that's okay. You can use their first name. But when you're sending an email, especially a thank you email to follow up on an interview, you want to use Dear Miss Marks, and then you want to sign off with sincerely or warm regards or whatever you want to say. But no hey, and you must use proper grammar, punctuation. And if this feels scary to you, look up some templates online and learn this because you must be able to send a professional email. Okay, last point about how to land a job in big law is keep at it, even if you hear crickets. So sometimes after an interview, there are crickets and you hear nothing. And the next step is to keep going and keep pressing forward. If you think you nailed an interview, awesome, keep going and keep setting up more just in case and for more practice. And this is the last time, this might be the last time I talk about networking, and to meet more people. The interview process also counts as networking. You may have a great interaction and still not get the job. This has happened to me before. But later on, you come across that person at an event or at a future interview or whatever, and now you already know them. So look at interviewing as continuing to create a web of connections. If you get a job out of it, amazing. If not, you've built a connection and you want to have a great impact on that person, even if you're not the right match for the role. And it's also okay to follow up a few weeks later if you haven't heard anything. But I would only do that with the person who set up the interview. At a big law firm, it's likely a recruiter, so follow up via email or phone call to get status on the application. If it's a smaller firm and an associate set up the interview or even a partner set up the interview and you're really passionate about the job, maybe follow up. But I would wait at least a month. These are busy people and sometimes these decisions take a while. The application and interviewing process takes a while. It's all very time consuming. So I would say generally you want the ball to just remain in their court and stay there. But if you're really excited about something or you feel like you really nailed the interview and you haven't heard anything back, it's okay to follow up, kind of given these parameters. So there you have it. That's how to get a job in big law. Again, every firm is different and that will have a lot to do with the location. So New York firms are going to be vastly different than other firms in smaller markets. This is by no means a guarantee, obviously, but it's a good solid effort to make sure that you're not ruling yourself out from the get-go. You're putting your very best foot forward. Now, once you get the job, time management, prioritizing work, and communicating effectively with others should be some of your strengths if you want to be successful at a big law firm. While those qualities might seem overwhelming or daunting or scary or like you're not really sure if you're good at that, that's okay. There is time to learn, and really, a summer associate job is kind of the place to learn them and hone those skills. So, more on that next week. That's everything for this week because, wow, I've run out of time. But I so appreciate you being here and listening in. This has been Legaltini, your very own sip of law school.